Just one day after President Biden warned that democracy is on the ballot, Donald Trump is set to host an authoritarian down in Florida. The former president invited Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán to his Mar-a-Lago estate today. He's repeatedly praised the leader for his hardline policies and inflammatory rhetoric. And CNN national correspondent Kristen Holmes joins me now. Kristen, what do we expect to see today?
Well, it's really unclear what we're actually going to see today. We talked to Trump's team, a senior advisor, telling me that this was a social meeting. By that, they meant a friendly meeting with no agenda. Now, of course, it's hard to believe that with a man like Orbán and a man like Trump, that there is absolutely no agenda, but that's what they're telling us today. They said they might put pictures out, they might even put a readout out, but the one thing to really note here is that this cannot be an official meeting because Donald Trump is not currently a world leader, so he has no obligations to report any part of his conversation with the Hungarian Prime Minister. The other thing to point out here is that the White House did not issue a formal invitation to Orbán. And on top of that, Orbán did not reach out for any sort of meeting with anyone on the Biden administration. This is significant because Donald Trump is not only the former president, but also he is the presumptive Republican nominee. He could be president again, and it gives you kind of an idea of where he might align himself with world leaders if he were to be reelected into office. It's not that surprising. Donald Trump has always said that he admires these authoritarian leaders. In fact, of Orbán, he said, I'm going to read it to you, some people don't like him because he is too strong. Nice to have a strong man in control of a country. But the two of them, in addition to just heaping praise on one another, they also seem to be almost drawing from the same political playbook. I want to play for you what they've both said on immigration.
We stopped illegal migration. We have actually built that wall, and it stopped illegal migration.
We had the strongest border in history. We built 500 miles of wall.
Very similar policy there on immigration. They have also aligned on various other things. Both of them have said that the war in Ukraine wouldn't have happened if Donald Trump was in the White House, something Donald Trump obviously loves to hear from Viktor Orbán. They've also aligned on attacking the free press. Again, we will wait to talk to people who are in the meeting to see if there is a readout. Make sure we report that out, Jim.
All right, Kristen Holmes, thank you very much. Joining me now for more on this, Ian Bremmer, president of the Eurasia Group and G0 Media. Ian, great to see you this morning. You know, a lot of Americans might be scratching their heads and saying, okay, he's meeting with the leader of Hungary. What's the big deal? What is the significance of this meeting for the viewers at home who are trying to sort this one out?
Well, I mean, of all of the countries around the world thinking about whether there might or might not be a Trump presidency in short order, the Europeans, the principal allies of the United States in the world today, are the ones that are most concerned. They are worried that Trump will be too close to Russia, too willing to throw President Zelensky and the defense of Ukraine under the bus, and uncommitted to the European Union and NATO. There is one European leader that is on the other side of that argument, of every one of those arguments, and that is Viktor Orbán in Hungary. He's the one leader in Europe that consistently has said that he has a more Russian model for his own country's governance, a nationalist model, not a democratic model. He's the one that has said that he doesn't want to provide additional economic support for the fight against that Russia has in Ukraine. And he also has been the most Eurosceptic of leaders among the EU members. So no surprise that Orbán in this regard is most interested to warm up to Donald Trump.
Yeah, and Ian, I mean, Viktor Orbán has sort of become a kind of a darling of the far right. If Vladimir Putin is not part of the conversation, a lot of the folks on the far right are praising Viktor Orbán. They had a CPAC conference, if I'm not mistaken, in Hungary at one point over the last couple of years. Tucker Carlson went out there and so on. And Trump has been praising Viktor Orbán out on the campaign trail. What's that all about?
Well, look, I think the danger here is that Trump has said on many occasions that when he becomes president, he's going to end the war in Ukraine in one day. And you wonder, why would it take him so long? I mean, he's obviously a very capable guy. But more seriously, this is someone who would be pushing Zelensky very hard to accept a partition, accept Ukrainian occupation from the Russians of their land, and also, basically get a ceasefire for that. Now, if that happens, many American allies will strongly oppose Trump and will align with the Ukrainians, but not Viktor Orbán. His policy would be, let's normalize with Russia. Let's start trading with them again. It's only hurting our economy. Let's work with the Americans. And when Orbán does that, that becomes more attractive for other leaders. Robert Fico from Slovakia would tilt in that direction. Maybe Meloni, the prime minister of Italy, and certainly populist opposition movements that support Trump, like, for example, those of Marine Le Pen and Eric Zemmour in France, polling above that of Macron today. In other words, Orbán is the leverage point that would allow a Trump-led United States to drive a wedge into Europe and into NATO. It's potentially an existential crisis in 2025 for those allies. I'm not trying to panic anyone. When I look at other countries around the world, I look at America's Asian allies, for example, Mexico, Canada, India, the Gulf states. They don't face these kinds of crises from a Trump presidency, but the Europeans really do, especially given the nature of the war in Ukraine, which isn't going so well right now. That's also probably a part of why Biden decided to lead his State of the Union speech last night with Ukraine, forcing all of the Republicans that support his policy and don't support Trump to stand up and applaud. And we even saw applause from Speaker Johnson in response to those comments last night. And that was an important moment for the president.
Yeah, I thought that was important as well when you saw the House Speaker sort of politely clapping, on this issue of whether or not Ukraine should get more aid. I mean, that was perhaps a slight indication of maybe where that negotiation process is headed. Ian, I also wanted to ask you about the president stressing that democracy is on the ballot. That was a key focus of his speech last night. Let's listen.
My purpose tonight is to wake up the Congress and alert the American people that this is no ordinary moment either. Not since President Lincoln and the Civil War have freedom and democracy been under assault at home as they are today. What makes our moment rare is that freedom and democracy are under attack both at home and overseas at the very same time.
Yeah, Ian, what did you make of that part of the speech? And I guess also when the president was talking about January 6th, there was sort of a muted response coming from the Republican side of the aisle. Many of those members of Congress voted to overturn election results last time around, so perhaps that's to be expected. But, I mean, this was not a full-throated, everybody was on their feet cheering the president as he was saying, let's save democracy.
Of course not. I mean, look, it's powerful, but it's also divisive. And the reason it's divisive is because Trump supporters support Trump in part, and maybe in large part, because they believe that democracy does not work for them, that the representative democracy that's being touted by President Biden and by elites, and not just in the political space, but also in the media space, corporates, bankers, you name it, that these are people that are promoting democracy for their own interests, their own self-interest, and that they want someone like Trump to break that system, to attack those people, because otherwise, what's in it for them? So the idea that you're defending democracy, if large percentages of your population don't believe in that democracy anymore, don't accept the legitimacy of those political institutions, and we see that in survey results time and time again in the United States, people don't trust their Congress, the Supreme Court, the executive, the media, the church. I mean, all of these core institutions that are sort of foundational to why the United States is the superpower it is today, to why the U.S. was founded well before it had a lot of power. That's why Trump is so successful. Trump doesn't speak to the division. He's a symptom of it. He's taking advantage of the fact that so many people don't buy that part of Biden's speech.
All right. Well, it's going to be quite the contrast from what we saw last night with Trump and Viktor Orbán later today. We'll be watching that as well. I know you will as well. Ian Bremmer, thanks so much for your time this morning. Really appreciate it.